So what we have to do now is move this aquarium. It's all looking nice. When you're moving an aquarium, having very clear, strong tubs is probably not a bad idea, because assuming that the weather is acceptable and you don't require the insulation of the foam boxes, if we put our fish in a clear container like this, it would mean that we can more easily monitor the fish to see if they're struggling. Because if you do put them in a foam box and maybe they have been there a little bit too long and maybe you've been distracted by other stuff, you've actually got to open up the box to check on the fish. But I'm thinking that a situation like this would actually be quite good, because you can check on the fish more regularly, and we can see if they look like they're struggling, we can fix them. Moving an aquarium, it's really important to remove any water that you want to keep before you start disturbing all the rocks. Because if the aquarium's been here for a long time and if there's a whole lot of crap underneath the rocks, then you will pollute all of the water and they'll be no longer any good for your move and could actually release hydrogen sulfide. So when you see lots of worms in your aquarium, they're bristleworms, different polychaete worms, fireworms. In general, I do try to remove them without worrying too much, because they can become in plague proportions. The other thing is that I've been moving aquariums probably every week since 1999, and every week I always get stung by these bloody things, and they sting you when your skin goes hard. And every week I say next week I'll wear gloves, but I'm so dumb I never manage to wear gloves. The other thing is, when you're moving these aquariums, also be aware that a lot of them have got top-up systems and sumps in the back, so you need to make sure all of that's empty before you go moving the aquarium, otherwise you'll bust your balls for nothing. Don't keep your chiller in a closed cupboard like this, because the chiller has to breathe, and with every chiller you'll find some air filters, so that air filter looks really dirty. So it's really important that you can easily access the air filter to clean. So in situations like this, that's a very handy place to put the dosing system, but you want to make sure that the dosing system doesn't mean that you're going to not be cleaning your chiller. So you want to be getting that out and giving that a clean on a semi-regular basis. You want to make sure that this can breathe, just to make sure that it's all efficient as possible. The very best things that you can buy for the safety and security of your fish is a UV sterilizer. Now this is an absolutely monstrous UV sterilizer for the tank, and running a low flow through a large UV sterilizer is a very good way of killing pathogens and reducing the chance of you getting any disease in your aquarium. So this is massive overkill, but worth every cent of it. Oversizing UV is one of the best things you could ever do. So getting gloves for moving glass is always a good idea, and using gloves to handle coral is always a good idea. I never do it, but it's a good idea. This tape comes in handy for these sorts of jobs, because you can't snap it, it doesn't elongate, and you swear by it, right?
You get it from a packaging company.
Packaging company. And you can get the residue off with metho. So whenever moving an aquarium, getting some tape like this is very good to help stop the doors swinging open. And with these Cades particularly, so you've got 1, 2, 3 doors, and they can all swing open very easily. And the other thing to be aware of with any of these doors is that these are usually toughened glass, like this. It's very, very strong, like these Aquels. But the thing to be aware of is if you tap them that way, they blow up, because toughened glass is super strong. You can kick it that way, no problem. But you got to be careful when your door's open. If something knocks on that, it can blow up with any of these glass door cabinets. This is a pretty ideal situation for moving fish, because here they are right next to me in the cab, and I can see them, I can see they're happy and healthy, but more than that, the water is being agitated all the time, which means I know the oxygen level. Tank in position, you want to measure it, and you want to make sure that you're totally happy with the position the tank's in, and you also want to make sure that you're totally happy with the tank on the stand, because sometimes you put it in position and it's not really quite exactly right on the stand. And then the next thing you want to do is make sure it's level. And the easiest way to level it, put a little bit of water in the bottom of the tank. And then if you can measure front, there, make sure the measurement's the same. Because a lot of these tanks now come with legs that you can actually screw in order to make sure the tank's level. So they do, Cade do, and that's becoming quite popular. Leveling a tank, particularly if the tank's got no center bridge or bracing, the tank must be flat, because if it's not leveled properly, then the chance of leaking is much higher. So what we're doing at the moment is just playing around with the leveling of the tank. We can use the spanner to adjust the legs, because the legs are adjustable. But what we really want to do is you put your hand on the tank and you give it a shake. And if the tank has a shake in it, then you're in trouble, because that means there's high points, and that means it is possible that you could crack your glass. If there's no high points and your tank's not level, that increases the chance of the tank leaking, because silicon is super strong that way, but it's not so strong that way. That's why you need your tank to really sit flat to make sure that the silicon is not getting pulled shear. When you move an aquarium, one thing that you need to think about is whether to clean the substrate. If possible, we really rather not clean the substrate because of all the good bacteria is in it. Now, if you've only got a thin amount of substrate like this, it's much better because there's less chance of hydrogen sulfide. But this tank has been pretty well looked after, and the substrate's fairly clean. So I've decided not to clean it. If the substrate was really black, then you would have to clean it. But every time you move an aquarium, this is about the best thing you could use. This is polyfilter, and what polyfilter will do is adsorb and absorb anything impure out of the water, including gases like hydrogen sulfide that can build up in your substrate. So what I'm doing at the moment is using some polyfilter to pour my water onto, and that helps not disturb the sand. Also, the polyfilter is helping to remove any gases that may have been from the gravel during this move. Very good UV sterilizer. It's very oversized for the tank, which I'm a huge fan of. But one thing to be very aware of with the installation of a protein skimmer, a UV sterilizer, is that the water comes in, it goes into the chiller, and then at the moment it's going into the bottom of the UV. You never want that to happen. You actually want it to go into the top of the UV and then down to the bottom and then out, because the UV itself has to stay full of water. So it's better if you lie it down or do it in any way that it can't siphon out. Now, because that's such a big UV and it's much higher than the sump, it does mean that if that's to run while it's there, if the pump's not on, that will the UV running without the water in it will damage the pump. As is common, when you move an aquarium like this one, you do lose a fair bit of visibility, because what you're actually trying to do is keep a lot of the good bacteria alive, and obviously that means not washing your sand too well and just trying to make sure that the good bacteria that was keeping the tank alive, it makes it into the new tank. What you don't want to go doing is hosing out all your filter material, and if possible, not hosing your sand out. If your sand's really dirty, then sometimes you do have to do it or replace it. But what's happening now is we've put some live rock in the tank, but visibility is not too great. So now what we need to do is keep an eye on the tank and get the corals into the reefs. So wherever we think we can place the corals. Now I, in this case, I'm going to recommend that photos are taken on a regular basis, and then I can instruct how the corals are going and where to position them according to the photos that I see. But from this point, it's basically a matter of putting the corals in the reef, making sure the corals are not getting stung by other corals, and then moving the corals according to either instruction or how you see they're going. Now, so once the tank's quite established, then you normally work off about a 3-week rule. And a 3-week rule basically means you put some corals in the tank, you see how they all look for a few weeks, and then if some of them aren't as happy as you would like, then you consider moving them.